How's it going, everybody? It's Rosine here for AstroFarsography. In today's video, it's the often requested galaxy editing tutorial. So today we'll be editing my image of the Andromeda Galaxy M31. This image was taken with a ZWO ASI 071 MC Pro, so that's a cooled, color dedicated astronomy camera. There was a IDIS NGS1 Light Pollution Filter in the imaging train, and it was shot on the Evostar 80ED. Stacked in Deep Sky Stacker, and usually when you stack FITS files you get this kind of really dark end result because there's no pre-processing done on it at all. With the DSLR in RAW mode there's a little bit of pre-processing done, so your image through a DSLR would be slightly brighter straight out the bat. There'll be a bit more detail. I'll begin this editing tutorial. Now, editing a galaxy to a nebula, there's a lot of points which are very similar to each other, so I'll be mainly pointing out the differences of galaxies when we come to them. The first thing I'm going to do with this image is actually make it smaller because my poor little laptop does not enjoy recording and image processing at the same time. So I'm going to go to image and image size, and I'm just going to change this to 1920 and let it keep the aspect ratio as it is. Right, so now I can begin editing. The first thing I'm going to do is I need to get a bit of brightness into this image. As you can see, it's way too dark to even do anything. So I'm going to use adjustment layers. Adjustment layers differ to adjustments because you can always go back and adjust an adjustment layer. So if we went to image and adjustment and curves and did that, if we're 10 steps down the way, I can't change this layer anymore. I have to step back through the history, and that's a pain. But if I go down here and make an adjustment layer curves, then as you see, it becomes its own layer, adjustment layer. And this means I can change this whenever I want to. So I'm just going to bring this up on the left hand side a bit. What you need to know about a histogram is we can see the histogram here, same as up here. Now with a histogram, the left hand side is your darks, the right hand side is the brights. So the far left is black, shadows, midtones, highlights, whites. And the size of the peak is the amount of pixels in that area. So because this entire image is basically black, that's why there's a massive peak on the left hand side. And if you look at the histogram while we do this stretch, you can see it moving up slightly. There you go. And this is the astro curve. This is what we call the astro curve, at least that's what I've heard it referred to as, and that's what I still call it. I'm going to make another curves adjustment layer because I want to brighten this up a little bit more. Now I'm going to make sure it doesn't flatten out on the ceiling, so I'm just going to pull it down about here. And you see this horrible smear of it? That's because we've not finalized these decisions yet. So what I'm going to do is use a keyboard shortcut, which is Ctrl-Alt-Shift-N plus E. And that stamps a visible layer. And as we can see now, it's smoothed everything out. So we started with that, and 2 adjustments later, we have that. I'm going to delete these layers just to keep the workload off of my laptop. Usually I'd keep every layer that I can. So don't delete your layers. I'm deleting them for tutorial sake because I'm filming. Okay, so we can see this horrible green cast of the image. That's from the light pollution filter. If we go to the colors, we can see it's quite neatly separated RGB or BRG. And what we need to do now is we need to set a color balance point and balance our colors. To set a color balance point, I'm going to use a threshold adjustment layer and a picker tool. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to find a random area of sky. I'm going to go down to adjustments and threshold. Threshold makes the image black and white. And as we move this down to the side, we can see that it shows us the darkest and the brightest part of the image. So with a very bright image like this, we can find dark sides of the sky, which is going to be about here, and there's a star here which we can use for reference as well. So I'm just going to minimize that. Then we're going to go over to the left hand side to the eyedropper tool, right click it and choose the color sample tool. Make sure you're at 5x5 average, because what that does is it takes the pixel sampled and 5 pixels around it and just evens out that number. I'm going to set one sample point in that bit of sky, and I'll set the other sample point on a bright star. Just going to get rid of that threshold layer because I don't need it anymore. Star. Actually, let's sample this star here because it's bigger. Okay. As we can see on the info panel now, it gives us all these figures. If you don't have your info panel up, go to Window, Info. So you can select all the infos here and get what the windows up that you need. So that is our color sampling points done already, and we are ready to balance this image. So again, bring up the info panel, and I'm going to use a levels adjustment now. So go to Adjustments and Levels. And what we need to do now is set a number and match RGB to it. So I'm going to probably balance to 40 background and probably 198 brights. So 40 blacks, 198 whites. These numbers are semi-arbitrary, you can pick your own numbers, but this scale goes from 0 to 255, with 128 being middle grey. Don't go above 255 or else you clip the whites and lose detail. Don't go too close to 0 because you clip the blacks and lose detail. I don't normally let it drop below more than 30, and I try to keep it down below 255 as often as I can. So we're going to click RGB and select red. I said I was going to change this down to 40. So to lower the black point number, we take the black point slider here and move it in down to 40, and 195 is fine. I'm going to select green, do the same here, grab the black point, bring it down. I'm not going to fettle this too much because I'm filming a video and it is 1 AM. I need to raise the white point now, so I'm going to take the white point slider and bring it up. And you probably already can see that there's going to be a bit of jostling back and forth just to make sure everything is balanced, because when you adjust one slider, the other side moves slightly. Okay, this is already on the black point on the blue channel, so we're going to raise the blue channel's white point now. And I need to bring the black point down a bit. Too far. Okay, that's balanced enough for me. Okay, I need to do the blue again. So here's where adjustment layer comes in. I can just double click that thumbnail icon there, and it brings the slider right back up. And I can move this down again, 212, 210, 209. Okay, so we've gone from that to that. I'm going to use that keyboard shortcut again, Control Alt Shift N plus E. I'm going to call this color balanced. The teacher in me is going to tell you to name every layer. The realist in me is going to forget to name layers. Right, so we've got this at the minute, and we could do another astro curve. So I'm going to go to curves selection, adjustment layer, sorry, curves. I can raise this up a bit more. We've still got some leeway here before we go to 255. And now we can see some of the dust lanes begin to appear. I'm going to stamp that layer, so Control Alt Shift N plus E. And we're getting somewhere. Now you can keep doing astrocurve after astrocurve after astrocurve to get all the detail appearing, but you eventually are going to blow out that core. So we need to raise everything out around it without blowing out that core. And to do that, we're going to select color ranges, feather, inverse selection, and then make our adjustments. That sounds like a lot, but what we're basically going to do is go to select and color range. I'm going to select the core. You see where it is down here? Change the fuzziness up a bit. It's about 116 should be fine. There we go. So this is our current selection, and now I'm going to feather the selection. So I'm going to go to select and mask. I'm going to feather this by about 5, I think. Yeah, that looks good. What feathering does is, I want you to imagine like a nice rolling embankment as opposed to a cliff. So when you're at the beach, for example, where the land is to the lake. So say you're at a lake. Where the land joins the lake, there's normally like a very smooth, gradual gradient into the water, right? That's a feathered edge, basically, as opposed to a sudden cliff face where there's land and then water. That's an unfeathered edge. So feathering the edge smooths it out, makes it a nice, gentle slope into the water. That's the best way I can think of describing it. So feathering it, we now selected the core. We don't want the core, I want to select the rest of the image. So I'm going to go to select and inverse, or you could use Control Shift and I. And this is one of the biggest differences between editing a nebulae and a galaxy. Galaxies, nebulae don't usually have this much dynamic range. Dynamic range being the difference between a bright part and a dark part of an image. They don't usually have this much of a difference. And for example as well with the galaxy, you need to pull the dust lanes out from the background sky without blowing out the core. And some people take multiple exposure lengths and then merge them into a HDR image. I live in Britain, ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got clear skies for that. So using an inverted selection like this, we can go to adjustment layers, curves, and having that selection open means it's automatically masked the image for us. If you press Alt and click the thumbnail for the mask, you can see the mask. And then just click the layer thumbnail again to get back to where you were. Gonna do a bit of an astro curve. No, I mean we're getting detail, but we're too bright still. So we'll do a contrast curve instead. So a contrast curve, otherwise known as the S curve. I'm gonna pull it down a bit on the left hand side of the data, so we're dimming out the dark areas of the image. And then we're going to bring it up on the right hand side to raise contrast in this image. So we've gone from that to that, and we're beginning to see the dust lanes even more. Detail begin to appear here. I'm going to stamp that layer, so Control Alt Shift N plus E. I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to select the color range. I'm going to select the core, hold Shift and select that bit immediately around the core. So we've got that now. Select, select and mask. 5, nah. 10. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Okay, that's good. Again, I'm going to inverse that selection, so you can either go to select and inverse, or Control Shift and I. And again, make a curves adjustment layer. And can you see this histogram's got a bit thicker? That's because we're raising the dynamic range of the image, we're raising contrast, we're pulling different layers of the image, midtones, shadows, highlights, we're changing the nature of the image and pulling more out of it. That's why that spike is getting bigger. So again, I'm going to pull it down slightly on the left hand side to dim the background, raise it up on the right hand side. A bit more contrast. Yep. And you might need to do it one more time. A lot of Galaxy work, in my workflow at least, is very repetitive. Doing the same thing over and over and over again, but very gently, very gently. I'd rather make multiple adjustment layers and do it very slightly each time, rather than just doing one adjustment layer and cranking it up to 11. I feel like doing it this way gives a lot more control, it's a lot more pleasing to the eye, it's a lot more natural. So again, I'm just selecting the core, doing the same feather again, inverse the selection, curve adjustment layer. And the reason is, every time I'm doing it, the core is getting a bit bigger and a bit bigger, and I want to keep masking that. If I keep masking it, it means we can compensate for the more detail with every pass that we make. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere. We've gone from that to this. And do another curve adjustment layer. Bring that one down there. Gonna raise this here. And you notice I didn't mask that one because I want to bring a bit more detail into the middle. And then I'll click OK. So I'm going to do the stamp visible, Control Alt Shift N plus E. I use this shortcut a lot because honestly I don't know how to do it through the menus. Okay, so if I group all these up, we've gone from that through several curve adjustments and masks to this, and I think we're getting somewhere. So this is one of the biggest differences of galaxies. Like I said, you're trying to squeeze out the dynamic range slowly, gently, a little bit at a time. If you just crank it up, it's going to be noisy, it's going to be harsh, it's not going to be very pretty, I don't think. And also, my teaching style is very much teaching the principles of what we're doing, the tools of when to use them, why we're using them. I want to teach that rather than how to make this image exactly. If I show you how to make this image, that's great, you can copy this image. But then you won't be able to really apply that to your own galaxies, to your own images. So if I show you the tools and how to use them and why we use them, I believe you can walk away with a better understanding of the procedure. So we can see that there's a bit of a color cast appearing again, so we're going to do another color balance, so levels adjustment layer. And this time around we could actually try using the eyedropper tool. So click the gray point here, click gray point eyedropper, sample a bit near our empty background sky and see what happens. So a very good job balancing that. The whites are still a bit over the place. But you know, I think I'm going to live with that. Sometimes there's something to be said about just using your eye and addressing the image that way. Because I bet if we balance this white point, the image is going to have another cast to it. There's a nasty color cast here. So I'm just going to double click that. I'm just going to press this arrow button to reset. Oops. And then I'm just going to use that color dropper tool, gray point there. And I'm just going to, on the RGB layer, so this is the master layer, I'm just going to bring this black point down a touch. Just a bit. Okay. So we've helped color calibrate this, got rid of that horrible blue tone all over the entire thing. If you really wanted to, you could mask the galaxy to keep the blues in the galaxy, but we're going to be going back to that in a moment anyway. Going to stamp that layer again, so Control Alt Shift N plus E. And what I want to do now is edit the background individual to the galaxy. Just going to delete all these layers. I'm having to delete these layers just to keep the workload off my laptop. Normally I'd keep all the layers I can. So to select the background, I'm just going to call this one now background. And duplicate that. Background edit, and name that background edit, because we're masking. It really helps to duplicate it, because a mask lets you see through the masked layer. If we had the background deselected, you would see the canvas, you'd see like the checkerboard canvas behind on Photoshop. It's not easy to edit with. I'll show you in a moment. So I'm going to go to select and color range. I'm going to select the background sky. I'm going to change the fuzziness all the way down until none of the galaxies really being selected. There is a rather large gradient in this image. I'm just going to ignore it for the sake of this tutorial because correcting it can be a bit of annoying. So I'm then going to go to select and mask and feather that by about 20. That looks a bit too much. Try about 15. Again, I can't think of any example in Astro editing where feathering is a bad thing. So I'm going to mask that. And this is what I meant. If we didn't duplicate the layer, we'd be dealing with this right now, and it's kind of hard to work with. So I'm going to use a curves adjustment layer. I've not masked the curves layer because I'm going to use a clipping layer. So pressing this means that a clipping mask. That means all these edits will only affect the actual image layer below it. So it's not going to affect background, but curves here is only going to affect background edit and not background. Does that make sense? I'll show you in a moment. So I'm going to pull the black down here. And what you'll see here is if I hide background edit, you can see that this eyeball goes translucent because it's not affecting background. It's not letting you see it. Activate background layer again, background edit, and there is affecting that one. So we've got that to that. That is excellent to me. I'm very happy with that. I'm going to stamp that layer, so Ctrl-Alt-Shift-N+E. And now I can work on my galaxy. You could just do a curves adjustment here, so we can just try normal curves. Going to do a contrast curve. Pull it down on the back slightly. Raise it up that way. A little bit more punchy, tiny bit more contrast. Let's see what the histogram is doing. So again, wider and wider. I'll merge that down. I don't usually merge down, but again, I'm trying to save on memory for my laptop. And I think this is going well so far. I think this is going well very much. So I'm just going to save this. Right, so like I said, there is a color cast in it. If you've got a gradient, you can use things like Gradient Exterminator, but in my tutorials I try to avoid using plugins as much as possible because I don't really like coming to a tutorial and being told you need plugins. Right, so I want to do some edits to this galaxy now. The galaxy, I like that. In Andromeda, I like the blue and the purple arms and the gold core. And to get that, we need to do some color balancing because the light pollution filter and the light pollution as well, I believe has color shifted the galaxy. If you look at the broadband spectrum and things like that, I believe it's color shifted the galaxy. So we need to compensate for that. And instead of using like levels and trying to boost this and change that, I'm going to use a combination of masks, white balances, hue and saturation. I need to stress here that this is where you begin going from scientific accuracy and begin to take a bit more artistic license with an image. There's probably a scientific way of figuring out the amount of correction needed. I'm not the guy to work that out. So I'm going to go to a selection, color adjustment layer, adjustment layers, color balance. Color balance lets you move up RGB to their opposites. So as you can see here, RGB is CMY, cyan, magenta, yellow. They're opposites. If you need to correct green, you add magenta. If you need to correct cyan, you add red. Brown, different. What I normally do is add a bit of blue to the midtones, add a bit of cyan to the midtones as well. Do the same in the highlights, and a bit of the same in shadows. So only very subtle, very subtle. See? And we need to mask this now because this is also affecting the background. We only want to do the galaxy. So I'm going to select galaxy. I'm going to call this galaxy edits. So we'll select the galaxy edits layer, go to select color range. And we need to select the whole galaxy, the whole shebang. Raise that up. And then we're going to feather, so select mask. Feather that, probably needs a rather large feather. Going to raise the contrast of this selection as well. And shift the edges slightly. And then we're going to use this mask. Color balance, I'm going to click the color balance layer again. Double click it. And make it a clipping layer. So again, can you see what the clipping layer has done? The whole image is blue, only the galaxy is blue. And to me that's already a lot better. I would probably be happy now to carry on editing. That's colourful enough. It's a very subtle change, very subtle. But you can also now go to like hue and saturation. Again, make it a clipping layer. And raise the saturation a bit. From what I've noticed when I've been developing this technique is it's very easy to go overboard. It's very easy to think, right, I'm going to put 30 saturation on. And, you know, it's a bit much. So less is more, I find. Again, like I said, this is up to artistic interpretation. You can do as much as you want. I'm going to make a vibrance layer as well. Make it a clipping mask. Vibrance more so stretches out the middle tones of the image. There we go. I'm happy with that. The core is nice and exposed, not overexposed. The golds are in the middle and the blues are beginning to appear on the outer edges as well. So if we group those up and call it color balance. We've gone from that, very brown, to that with the blues in it. And really, this is basically the end of editing the galaxy. From now on, it's almost identical to editing in Nebula, which I have a tutorial of in Photoshop and Affinity and GIMP. But since we're already here, let's carry on a bit more, shall we? I'm going to want to add more detail to the galaxy itself. So I'm actually going to get that mask back. So layer 1, I'm going to call this Galaxy Detail. I'm going to click the mask button, and here's a little trick. If you have a mask that you want to keep using, like this one here, click that mask, hold Alt, and drag the mask to be copied onto the mask where you want to put it. And that's now copied that mask onto this image. So to do a few more edits and to maybe do a bit more contrast, a bit more separation perhaps, I'm going to use the camera raw feature. But before I do that, I'm going to right click this layer. I'm going to convert it to a smart object. Making it a smart object means not only is it first of all selected as only the galaxy, but because camera raw is a filter, if we If you didn't have it as a smart object, you'd do the camera raw filter, for example, and it's baked in. Similar to the whole reason why we use adjustment layers versus adjustment function. Using it as a smart object saves the camera raw settings into the image. Because one downfall is this. It's showing it like this. So I'm going to add just a drop of noise reduction into it and a bit of color noise reduction. I'm going to add a bit of contrast. Clarity and texture definitely help sharpen an image, but just it's very easy to have depth by sharpening. And let me show you what I mean. I'm going to crank this vibrance all the way up. It's horrible, but I'm going to show you. So that's what we've got. Really gaudy. It's not what I want at all. I can go into Camera Raw here. Now you see Smart Filter, Camera Raw. I can double click Camera Raw. And we've got this back open. And now I can just remove all this vibrance. Maybe put like 3 points of vibrance onto it. And then click OK. And it will make that change. There we go. Much better. Stamp the visible layer, Ctrl-Alt-Shift-N+E. And I'm happy enough with all this that I have to delete these because my laptop's running slow. I need a bit more separation again, so I'm going to use a curves adjustment layer. Pull it down a bit on the left hand side. Let me show you this tool. This is the picker tool. Now you use the picker tool and you can select a part of the image and it will plot a point on the histogram already on the curves for you. So I want to raise that point and I know exactly that I just need to put one here. And I can raise that there. Just helps that a little bit more. Make another layer. So Ctrl-Alt-Shift-N+E. Begin to feel like I'm losing the background a little bit more. You can do another background select and copy, select and mask. Let's do that really fast. So color range. Background, select and mask, about 10. That's not good enough for me because it's going to affect this part of the galaxy, so try it again. Select and mask, feather 10, better. Drop the background a bit more. That's a bit too dark. I feel like we're beginning the clip. Let's have a look at our info. Yeah, we're getting down there a bit. And there's usually a bit of a green cast that begins to appear. And I believe I can see one on here, so I'm just going to go to the green channel and drop that ever so gently. There is a free plugin that you can use called Hasta La Vista Green. Let me show you what it does. So I'm going to select the galaxy. I'm going to go to camera filters. Deep Sky Color, Hasta La Vista Green. And you can kind of see what it did to the background. Well, this would have done it to the whole image. So, see the galaxy? The green tint's gone in there. So, you can do that with the curves adjustments layer. You could just go in. Let me show you how you do it with curves. So I'm going to take off HLFG. So this is the curves layer. And then deselect this one so I can actually see through to this layer. There's one thing I do. I use too many interim layers. You can just delete that. So this is the curves 1, which is affecting the original stack. Again, like I said, I should really name these things. So I can go back to my contrast layer here. Again, another good thing about using adjustment layers, go to the contrast layer, I can go to the green channel, and I can use the picker tool, select this part of the galaxy, and then I can just drag down slightly. Be very careful here, because if you remove green, you add magenta, or you can just take it right out of the highlights. I prefer that one. See, once you start taking it out and putting it back in, you really notice it, don't you? I'm gonna about there. And that is how you do your own Hasta La Vista green, roughly. Without using plugins. Gone from that to that. And to be honest, I think we're nearly there. What I'll do from here is a star reduction base, and I'll call this one star reduction. I believe I've done a video of this already. Yeah, I believe I've already done a star reduction video. But either way, we're here. So you make 2 layers. Make your normal one and then duplicate it so you have the star reduction base. So star reduction base and then star reduction. On star reduction, we have the 2 layers so you can blend it. It gives you options, right? You'll see in a moment. So selecting the star reduction layer, I'm going to go to select and color range, select highlights. Now with the range, the lower number you make it, the lower values are going to be selected. So the same way how 0 to 255, like the scale I mentioned, this goes from 0 to 255 as well. So if you want to select only the very brightest highlights, you use a higher number. So I'm going to use about 200. See what that selects. That's great. Don't worry too much about this stuff. We can mask this. Better it by 2. And then mask. Select the thumbnail of the image. Then we're going to go to Filter, Other, Minimum. And this is going to be a very small amount. So you can see in the preview window just how much it's reducing it by. So it's probably going to have a very slight reduction, like 0.3. Click OK. Here's one issue here. Look at the galaxy. Don't worry too much about that right now. Just look at the overall effect of the star reduction. Good, I like that. Now, normally I'd be editing this at its native resolution that came out, like 5,000 pixels, whatever it does. That gives you a lot more scope, and a lot more leeway. You have more pixels to play with when you're doing things like noise reduction, doing things like star reduction, things like that. Like I said, I only made this smaller for the laptop, for the editing, for the tutorial's sake. I would crop at the end of my editing session, right? So throughout this entire tutorial, you've probably seen these stacking artifacts around the edge of the border. And for some of you, this is probably driving you mad. This is the way I do it. I crop at the end, because that means I can set whatever aspect ratio I want. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Right now, we need to address this, right? So it's kind of affected these stars in the galaxy here. You can finesse that. Like I said, if it was the bigger image, if it was the native size image, you would have more pixels to feather, and that would be a lot smoother, and you probably wouldn't have that error right now. You wouldn't have that issue. But we do. I'm going to select the mask. So this is our star mask. I'm going to select the mask layer. So hit the thumbnail. I'm going to bring my brush up. Just going to bring it smaller. I'm just going to paint black into the galaxy here. So I'm painting black onto the mask, and wherever black is on a mask, it hides. So on our star reduction layer, because we've masked that galaxy out, you see there's no difference. And if you really want, if you don't like the effect that you've got, you can change the opacity of it and blend it into the one behind you. That's why we keep it. So you could blend it in. I like it at 100% strength. All right, right now, pretty happy with this. A bit more sharpening you could probably do. Let us do a bit more sharpening maybe. I'm going to flatten this image. So let's go to image, let's go to layer and flatten image, discard hiddens, sure. So again, I'm only flattening because I'm doing a tutorial. And we could do a camera raw plugin. Use the clarity again, let's try that. So that's working, that's doing it, yeah, okay, I'm digging that. Bit of texture maybe. Are you noticing the error, the mistake I've made right now? I haven't masked the galaxy, so all that sharpening has also affected the stars. So the entire image has gotten sharper. The stars have got more crunchy, it's not very nice. Let's just step back through the history, duplicate that. So I should have duplicated it first. And just go to... So I should have duplicated it first. And now color range, let's select the galaxy. Make sure it's on sampled colors. Hold shift so you can select all of the galaxy. All the colors in the galaxy. Expand that. Select and mask it. That's fine. Mask it. And now we're going to use the camera raw feature. This is where you would then add your clarity and sharpening. And there we go. And I think this tutorial has been long enough now. I promise I'll show you about the cropping. So on Photoshop, if you have the rulers selected, or if they're not there, you can go to View and Rulers. If you press Alt and click into the ruler, you'll bring a guideline out. And again, so I want to use the guidelines to select the parts of the image which are fully stacked. So like that. From there you can make a marquee. And you can crop all that out. So we're going to make the marquee, select inside there, image, crop. And there you have it. See, here's one problem. I want to make this 1920 by 1080 pi, right? I want to make this 16 by 9 for a wallpaper on a desktop. If we look at the size of the image now, it's too small. We're going to have to upscale this again now. It's going to destroy quality, whatever. It would have been better just to crop it. It would have been better if we'd left it at the native resolution, 5000 by whatever it is, and then cropped it at the end. So I want to put this onto my computer, 16 by 9, and there we go, it would be there. And then you can crop it from there. So this is one reason why I just live with that stuff at the end. All those cropping artifacts that you can see on the histogram, I just ignore that they exist. I just deal with the main part of the image. Those two lines on the left hand side, they don't exist to me. Then at the end of the image, when everything's still its full size, and I've finished all my editing, and I'm like, okay, I'm good with that. I want this to be done. That's my image. I will then crop it, because that way, if I want a 16 by 9 for a wallpaper, I can crop it to 16 by 9. Correction, I save it before I crop it. And then if I want a 16 by 9, I crop it 16 by 9. If I want an 8 by 10, I crop it 8 by 10, 6 by 4, etc. like that. Because as it stands now, I have to do this and crop it like that. But there you go, there's our image. There is a slight blue tint in the background. So you know what to do by now, I hope. You'll select the background, remove the blue tint. But for now, I'm calling this one done. I hope this has been useful for you. Let me know down in the comments down below if this has been useful. I know this has been a longer tutorial. I feel like I tried to go a bit slower because some of the comments people were saying I was going too quick. I've tried to slow it down a bit, be a bit more in depth, a bit more explanation of what I'm doing. So if this has been useful, let me know down below. Thanks very much for watching. Any other suggestions for tutorials? You know where to find me. Clear skies everyone, keep looking up, keep them cameras clicking. I'll see you later.